This is Carolina Business Review. Major support provided by Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their families, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
This may sound a bit flippant and even a bit of an arcane reference, but what was that tagline after the release of Jaws 2, the sequel to the amazing Jaws? The tagline in Jaws 2 was something about just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water. I'm Chris William, and welcome again to the most widely watched and longest running program on Carolina business, policy, and public affairs. And just when you thought it was safe to start reading the news again or watching after political debate, it seems that the anxiety around the economy, hurricanes, schooling, and more malfunctional political discourse is clear and still dominant. As we do every week, we will try to make sense of some of these central themes going on in the Carolinas and what's important to know now. And we do it with three key leaders from across the region, and we start right now.
Major funding also by Truliant Federal Credit Union, proudly serving the Carolinas since 1952 by focusing on what truly matters, our members' financial success. Welcome to Brighter Banking. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. And Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation on which our communities improve and grow. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Mike Brenan from the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, Gary Salamido of the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, and Alan Smith from OneSpartanburg, Inc.
Hello and welcome again to our program. Almost happy fall, and thank you for supporting this dialogue. I'd like to welcome virtually now three key leaders from across the region. Michael Brenan from South Carolina's Chamber in Columbia, Gary Salamido from the North Carolina Chamber in Raleigh, and Alan Smith from the Spartanburg Chamber in the upstate of South Carolina. Gentlemen, welcome. And specifically, Michael, I want to single you out because you're kind of new in the job. It's a new gig for you. I know you're a recovering banker, and I know you chaired the South Carolina Chamber for a while, so you know the DNA, but you've got the job now, so congratulations, but thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
Michael,
I'm excited about it.
Oh, yeah, no doubt, and I think probably we'll do a great job, a lot of eyes watching this. So, again, Michael, congratulations. Start with you, and I'd like you all to answer this question, but as we get past a lot of the debate around the politics, presidential politics, and we get back into whatever a normal rhythm is, what one thing will be a concern for you? Not a worry, but a concern. What's on your radar? Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the concern that is top of mind for me is what happens to the regulatory environment post-election. You know, obviously, if we end up with a Republican-controlled Congress, there'll probably be see much of the new rules and regulations that have come as a result of the Biden administration probably rolled back. You know, if Trump is certainly elected, he's going to push for that. You know, if we end up with a Democratic president and a Republican-controlled Congress, that's going to be interesting. Mm-hmm. The other issue would be what's going to happen with tax policy, quite frankly. You know, because we're going to approach a tax cliff on the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and those pro-business provisions are set to expire at the end of 2025. So those would be the two primary concerns at this point in time, Chris.
Gary, what's on the top of your list? And I don't mean just the chamber agenda, but you've been doing this for a while. I mean, you got a pretty good sense of the lay of the land here. What's your single biggest concern?
Yeah, thank you. And it's good to be with you today, as always. And I think it kind of falls into two buckets. One is getting beyond the noise and the difficult and the toughness of the elections to begin to solve the problems that job creators, businesses are facing every day. The agenda of the community, of our members, doesn't change. So for me, it's how long is it going to take to get beyond the noise and the kind of the pain and the toughness of this political cycle, because it's one we haven't seen before, which has had a lot of disruptions all along the way. It's very historic in many ways. So how long is it going to take for that healing to get done so that we can get to the work of helping people find good jobs and communities? We have a great opportunity here in the Carolinas and in our country to make some fundamental reforms and to come together because we have a good economy. We have something going forward that we can build on. Of course, there's challenges, as Mike pointed out, but I think there's a lot of opportunity. So getting beyond the noise to solve the problems that people and communities all over our state are faced with in order to get that good job and build that community.
Alan, what's looming large for you in the upstate?
Well, I would agree with Mike and Gary. I would say, it looks like a rate cut is imminent, and that's a good thing. But I think that has the ability to perhaps exacerbate an existing issue, and that's workforce. I mean, you would think in a community where 29 people a day are moving into it, that we would be able to have the people to fill the jobs. But it's been said already earlier. The problem is we have more jobs and more people. And so when we get the rate cut, and I think the economy will respond well, I believe there's going to be more hiring, and it might exacerbate the workforce issues. So it's something that we're focused on locally. I think the state of South Carolina is rightly focused on it as well.
I know the three of you probably know this better than most of our viewers, but I did want to go back to something. In July of last year, right in the middle of the summer of last year, 2023, and I think this got lost in vacations, quite frankly, and it was really more geeky business news than it was anything else. Bloomberg reported that for the first time in this country's history, and this is pretty big, first time in this country's history that the center of gravity of wealth has moved from the Northeast to the Southeast. And it went on to say, and I know you all are going to know this, but it went on to say that the data now shows that there's more wealth based in the Southeast than the Northeast. And it talked about 100 billion plus. But I don't want to get into the details of that. But what I'm leading to here, and especially during presidential politics and the season that we're in, is it seems like 4 states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, have become this center of gravity politically, and how the politics are being focused, and certainly in the South, but on those 4 states. So, Mike, again, start with you, but please, you all, I'd like you to weigh in on that. Why have these 4 states become so desirable politically? Is it because of the wealth effect, or is there something else going on here in your view?
Wow, we could spend a couple hours talking about that, Chris. I came to South Carolina in the fall of 1999 and was previously in North Carolina and Virginia prior to that. And so I've kind of watched the growth of industry. I mean, obviously that was started by BMW way back when Carroll Campbell was governor. I just think more and more people are coming to the South. They're coming to the Southeast, and they're coming to retire. And often they certainly bring their wealth with them. It's not an inexpensive place to live along the coast of South Carolina. We do happen to have some billionaires in South Carolina, which that may not have been the case in the past, but I think it's the growth of industry. I mean, South Carolina is the largest exporter of automobiles in the country. We've outpaced Akron on the production of tires. Obviously, what's going on with aerospace and Boeing has been a tremendous lift to the economy, and therefore it's grown wealth. So, I think people are just leaving the Northeast, and they're bringing their wealth with them to the Southeast.
Gary, does the political center of gravity, does this surprise you?
No, I think the South, and speaking for North Carolina and South Carolina, has become really competitive, right? We've become really competitive on our talent and our attraction of talent. Our business climate's very competitive. We're making infrastructure investments. When you put all that together and you have a plan and you compete as fiercely as the 4 states that you mentioned are competing with each other, we all get better. And people are seeing that. They're seeing their opportunity not only for themselves, but for their children and for beyond their grandchildren. I mean, I have 3 grandchildren, and the opportunities that are going to be in North Carolina, I think, are significant. So when you have that growth and when you have that opportunity and we have the announcements and you have the population and the net in-migration of talent and people from all over, you begin to get to be a place that people pay attention to. And right now, the way it's structured, our states people are paying attention to them because we're working and we're creating opportunity and people are coming, and there's reasons for that. So there has political consequences, there's census implications to it. And, with that comes great responsibility too. And neither the South isn't sleeping anymore. The South is here and providing good jobs for people. And what comes with that is a responsibility to help level out and to help do the things that are right for our nation.
Alan, the cause and effect of some of the things that Gary and Mike just talked about, this is first world problem, I'm sure you would call it that, and that's workforce housing. And as you just said, 29 people a day moving to the upstate, the Spartanburg area. So how do we solve for that? Are we solving for it now? It's just moving slowly, or are there some places doing better than others? But are there big things that we need to be doing about this workforce housing issue?
So people follow jobs and affordability. Doesn't matter. Those are the top 2 things. Every single year, Gallup does a poll, and we're winning in both of those categories. So I don't see population growth slowing at all. And we do not have enough housing. You're right, at all levels, whether it's starter home or it's executive housing, we do not have enough housing. But as it relates to workforce housing, we've been fortunate here locally where we're basically saying if you want to be incentivized on a multifamily project, then a certain percentage of your units must be affordable, must be attainable, 80% AMI. And so, I think there's some policy levers and communities are realizing, ours in particular, are realizing that, we have an opportunity to be proactive here. We're not at the point yet we're having to react to it. There's other communities like Charleston and Greenville that are reacting. We still have the ability to be proactive, and there's some of those local policies. I think we're building more affordable product. Not as much as we need, but I think it's a good start.
Gary, Mike, as Alan talks about the policy and changing the policy, is it inventory of workforce housing? Is it the appetite of builders? Is it the opportunity in different cities? I mean, what's the biggest barrier for workforce housing, and are we solving for it?
Yeah, I'll jump right in. It's permitting reform. It's modernizing our permitting reforms between our localities. It shouldn't take longer to build something than it does to permit. It shouldn't take longer to permit something than it does to build it. And so we've got to modernize our permitting reform, our permits, how we get permits, how we identify places for those, how we use land. Right now, that's the biggest barrier, I think, is, how do we work together between urban and rural communities to build the kind of housing for all parts of the workforce that we need. So permitting reform, regulatory reform, Mike talked about it earlier, is a key part of how we're going to be able to address this and how we're going to increase the inventories. We're going to have to be innovative. We're going to have to look at public-private partnerships differently. We're going to have to look at how we and where we place the folks and how we integrate it with our communities that are more urban and those that are more rural. So we've got to really modernize permitting. Michael,
is there anything that would supercharge this process more than what Gary and Alan have already talked about?
Well, it's interesting. We had a workforce symposium all day yesterday in Columbia, and that issue did not come up. A lot of different workforce issues came up, including what are we going to do about child care, in this state, and I know that's on the top of the list of the governor and of the speaker. So I got to be honest. I mean, I agree with everything Gary said about the permitting reform, but that's just not an issue that, at least in Columbia, that I've not given a lot of thought to.
Well, okay, but let's go down, let's chase this one down. You talked about childcare. Both Michelle Saunders, Secretary of Commerce in North Carolina, and Harry Lightsey, her counterpart in South Carolina, both said there is a childcare crisis. And they used the term crisis. Both of them used the term crisis. I know you all have heard that term. Is it that acute? And who is solving for that? Anyone, please, here.
Well, I will tell you that again. It's on top of mind for the governor. It's on top of mind for the speaker. It's top of mind for the Chamber of Commerce, both here at the state level and at the local level, because it's a problem in every corner of this state.
I'm sorry, Michael, but in the interest of time, I want to get Gary and Alan on this specifically. Alan, Gary, can General Assemblies, can the State House, can Jones Street in Raleigh, can they fasten child care funding to education funding and make it more palatable for everyone?
I'll jump in, and I think we have to be innovative. I think we really have to look at public-private partnerships differently. I think we have to look at local, state, and business to come together and figure out how we can make it affordable. A couple things. One is we absolutely have to have it. We do have a crisis. It's over $5 billion impact here in North Carolina every year. We did a study with the U.S. Chamber, and it's a bipartisan issue. So I think we have to figure out how do we facilitate work through providing safe, affordable childcare. And that means looking at it differently. It means looking at the regulatory framework for our childcare systems and our childcare facilities. It means looking at innovative models that are public and private partnerships. We have companies here that are building childcare facilities now on their campuses, and then looking for how do we integrate with the local community? How do we help pay for it? And so we have to really look at it very, very differently. And yeah, I think we can. I think General Assemblies can. And we've done a couple things. We did a survey, and it was clearly a bipartisan issue. Both Republicans and Democrats, we're majority Republicans here, know that it's an issue, but they want innovative market-based solutions that come along with the support that the communities have.
Yeah, Alan, what do you think? Is there a connection between education and childcare that can be fostered further?
So I'm going to give you some continued admiration of the problem. We have 15.7 childcare workers for every 1,000 kids under the age of 10 in Spartanburg County. So it's incredibly complex in terms of a workforce crisis. The other thing that no one talks about is the private sector. I mean, we often address this issue through the lens of the consumer and affordability and access and so on and so forth. But I sat down and met with someone that's opened 260 childcare centers, and they really unpacked this for me. And so when you take on a 6-week-old, you lose money hand over fist. At 1, 2, and 3, you're losing money hand over fist because the ratios are so high, and they should be. At 4, that's when you start to recognize profitability. Well, the unintended consequence of government-provided 4K care is that year of profitability is now off the table for private providers, and it's been a real challenge, and it's why you're seeing more and more private providers getting out of the business. So we also need policy that helps the private sector as well.
Let's shift a bit. We have about 8 minutes left, and Mike, I want to come back to you because in the news recently, Boeing in Seattle, Washington, the high concentration of Boeing workers, in fact, 30,000 machinists went on strike within the last couple of days, and has created quite an issue for the Boeing workforce. Does that help the South Carolina site? Because the whole point of the South Carolina site as it came out of the ground in 2008 was a non-union shop with access to workers. So do you think that's a boon for the South Carolina Boeing site?
You know, I think it has certainly the potential, Chris, but this news came out last evening, And I haven't heard a lot of commentary around it yet today, but I think there's certainly potential there for more, maybe bringing more jobs from Washington to Charleston.
And Gary, will bring you in on this, and not necessarily about Boeing, but the larger implication around unions in the Carolinas has always been non-union, mostly, at least in contemporary industrial complex that North and South Carolina are now. So does this start to, I'm just not going to say this right, Gary, but does the dialogue around union efforts to unionize in the Carolinas become more acute? Are you confident that the Carolinas will continue to go down the road of resisting what the bad parts of unionization? How does this wash over you?
Yeah, we're very aware of it, and we're very attuned to the increased activities that we're seeing across a number of industry sectors with regard to union activity. And we think that the Carolinas would be a prize for the union community, and we're going to stand very resistant to that. I mean, the right to choose whether you not or join a union or not is important. That right to work is critical. It's the reason we have a good quality of life down here. It's the reason that people are coming here. So we're seeing more activity. When you see a union representative at both the Republican and the Democrat convention given such prominent roles, it's really important that we recognize that union activity is increasing. There's generational differences in how they look and feel about unions. From where I'm sitting, we're very aware, we're diligent, and we're going to keep our guard up for sure to make sure that North Carolina remains a right to work state.
Well, we have about 4 minutes, and I do want to come back to something we have not talked about, at least in this program yet, and that's innovation. Innovation is used a lot. It's ubiquitous. It's sometimes arcane. It's sometimes opaque, but it's talked about a lot, about innovation circles, innovation corridors, and it's important. Sometimes we don't know how. But so let's unpack for just a minute here. Innovation, how do we measure innovation in the Carolinas, and how do we know it is important? Alan, we'll start with you, since there tends to be a creative streak that goes on in the upstate.
It's critically important. And I think our economy in South Carolina is evolving. I mean, we were agrarian, and now we're manufacturing. And one of our focuses here locally is we got to diversify. This is an area that was completely saturated with textiles, and we know what happened to textiles. So we're trying to diversify our economic development approach. We're now, we're winning in manufacturing. We're going to continue to do so. So, through innovation, we're trying to cultivate an environment to where we can better recruit those life science, bioscience jobs. Right. Gary, if you want to send any of them down from RTP, we'd be happy to take them.
Nice try.
But it is, I think that when you look at the two states, I think North Carolina is ahead of us in that regard. When you look at RTP, and we don't have the research campuses that North Carolina has. And so I think innovation is a tremendous opportunity for South Carolina in the future.
Let me come back to something, Gary, not to skip over you, Mike, but let me go to RTP for a second. Has RTP over all the years been able to standardize the measure of innovation, Gary? Do you get the sense that there's a measurable accountability around innovation?
Oh yeah, and it's a cultural thing too, and it's a recognized opportunity when you have it going on, and when you have the collision that occurs between the university systems, those innovations coming out of there, the business community, and you have it in a place that has the infrastructure and business climate to support that. It really works. I mean, I was just talking to someone the other day about who's trying to do something around a Research Triangle Park type initiative in an energy-centric state out west, and they're looking, because what happens is the money comes where it comes where it's wanted and stays where it's welcome. And when you have the research-intensive universities and the infrastructure, you can get innovations out of the labs. And that's what happens, particularly life sciences here, but it's happened in energy and all kinds of places. So yeah, it's very measurable.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left. And Mike, we started with you. We're going to end with you, Mr. Brenan. So let me ask you this question. And we literally have about a minute left. As we now head into the last part of the year, and this economic expansion is long in the tooth for sure, are you concerned that it's going to slow down dramatically between now and the next 18 or 24 months?
Well, certainly that could be the case nationally, but I really don't see it happening in the Carolinas. you were talking about innovation, and I was with Dr. Cutler yesterday, and was talking to me about all the innovative things going on at South Carolina. And if they're going on there, they're going on at Clemson, they're going on at MUSC, they're going on at every university in North Carolina. And I think there's a lot of innovation going on that we don't know about.
Yeah, okay, all right, that'll be the final word. Thank you. And it's Mike, by the way, it's also encouraging to see that actually Clemson and USC are working together on something, even if it's innovation. So thank you for bringing us that good news. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Good luck going forward, Michael, on the job. Congratulations. Gary, thank you for joining us, especially last minute. And Alan, always nice to have you on as well. Have a good weekend, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Okay.
Have a good
Take care. Good to be with y'all.
Thank you.
See ya.
Take care.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, Truliant Federal Credit Union, Sunoco, Colonial Life, High Point University, and by viewers like you. Thank you.